What's up guys, TSJAwesome 628 here, back again with another F1 2020 My Team Career Mode video, this time for the French Grand Prix, and we have, well, a 7 race win streak going into this race, so hopefully we'll be able to extend that here, the French Grand Prix. It isn't one of my strongest tracks, so Ricardo will have a good chance of stopping us. I don't think any of the other teams will be able to challenge us based on the rate we've been upgrading recently and how far we've been ahead in the last few races. But we just put some activities in through the timeline, and we've got an invitation event that we're about to go to right now. So it's also at France, but we do complete it, so that's just a free 1,000 acclaim and 150,000 extra cash. And one of our upgrades has indeed failed, so we're probably just going to go across and repurchase that immediately. It's for the aerodynamics, and it was for drag reduction, so that should just about come in time for the Austrian Grand Prix now instead of the French Grand Prix when it's supposed to come for. But at the moment we are miles ahead on the performance index anyway, so an upgrade coming a week later isn't the worst thing in the world right now. But as we head onwards to the French Grand Prix, we're just gonna go to the race weekend and we'll check out the weather forecast and see what the weather's looking like. So as we get into the laptop, as per usual, the weather forecast is completely dry for the entire weekend. In the race it is fully sunny, so it should be a normal race. With a French Grand Prix, it's sometimes a 1-stop, sometimes a 2-stop, depending what tyres you start on. If you start on the softs, it will be a 2-stop. If you start on the mediums, it will be a 1-stop. So it will be good to see whether some of the midfield teams on the 1-stop will be able to challenge some of the designated front runners. After practice, we put on an upgrade for front downforce, and it should arrive in time for the British Grand Prix, and it will just be extending our advantage over the rest of the field as we get into qualifying. For our first lap in Q1, as I said at previous circuits, I will just try and set a clean lap to make sure that we do get through to the next session. And as we head to the end of the lap in Q1, we will cross the line, and it will be a 1:26.3, which is enough to put us fastest for now. And as we fast forward to the end of the session, we are second behind Daniel Ricciardo, but we're both safely through, and Ricciardo was second ahead of the two Mercedes cars, who were third and fourth. Looking to see who ended up getting knocked out, there was a surprise in there as Kevin Magnussen made it through to Q2 at the expense of Esteban Ocon, who at his home Grand Prix will be disappointed with his qualifying session and is knocked out in Q1 in 17th position. So he will have to have a big recovery going into the race, and joining him out in Q1 are the two Haas cars, Magnussen's teammate Nicholas Latifi, and the two Williams cars, Jack Aitken and Nick de Vries. So obviously, as expected for the Haas cars and Williams cars, but it'll be good to see what Magnussen can do in the upcoming session, as he is not expected to be here in the first place. As we head into Q2, we have a fuel system fault, which means we're going to have to wait 7.5 minutes to get out to set our first lap. So we're still going to be able to have time to set the lap and on board with it now. As we head through the first few corners, I decided that because of the fact that we couldn't get out early, I would definitely just go for soft tyres and not bother trying to get it through on the mediums. And as we cross the line, Now for our lap time in Q2, it is a 1:26.1 and puts us 4th. So a few cars were just ahead of us, although I believe they had time glitches through simulation, because there's no way that Albon, Giovinazzi or Gasly are that quick. Otherwise they'll be fighting for the win tomorrow. Ricciardo only just scraped through to Q3, but he did set his lap on medium tyres, so he is going to be going through that one stop tomorrow, and he could be quite dangerous in the race. So both of our cars, both Mercedes, both Racing Points and both Ferraris all make it through to Q3, along with Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly. So that means that Max Verstappen will miss out on Q3, along with Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Danny Kvyat, Kevin Magnussen, and Lando Norris. So Magnussen did manage to out-qualify Lando Norris there to start P15, and if he gained another 10th, he would have been starting P13. So he was right in the mix with those drivers, and showing that this weekend he may have some pace in that Alfa Romeo. As we head for our first lap in Q3, now it's time to push as hard as possible and set what we think is going to be the quickest lap that we can do, because Ricciardo will be back on the soft tyres and probably be back right at the front of the timesheets. And as we head around the final corner for our first lap, it's a 1:26.1 and just ahead of Ricciardo, who also set a 1:26.1, but as we head on to our second lap, we're going to assume that Ricciardo will improve, so we do want to set an improvement ourselves as we head through the first couple of corners, and we're already 2/10 up, so that's good news for us to have gained quite a lot of time. As we come towards the end of the lap, I just kept finding more and more time, and we're half a second up as we head into the final corner, and on the exit we lose a little bit of time, but we're still going to be around 7/10 up on our lap. Ricciardo did set a 1:25.9, but we go that much quicker, and we take pole for the French Grand Prix.
It's time to remind ourselves of our top three: Thomas, Ricciardo and Lance Stroll. Well, that wraps up qualifying, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow as we head into the Grand Prix.
So we take pole, 5/10 ahead of Ricciardo in the end, despite the fact that if we failed to set that final lap, we would have been starting second. So a brilliant final lap. Lance Stroll will line up third, a second and a half behind us, and Lewis Hamilton completes the second row in fourth. Leclerc will start fifth, Gasly sixth, Bottas seventh, Albon eighth, Vettel ninth, and Antonio Giovinazzi will round out the top 10. So this top 10 was pretty spread out. Usually there aren't 8/10 between 3rd and 10th, I don't think. Usually it's a lot closer in this area. Well, because it didn't seem like there were a group of drivers that close together. It was all just slowly about 1/10 or 2/10 apart from each other. But we'll see if it's closer tomorrow. Yes, I'm feeling confident we'll take our qualifying pace into the race, because our two cars are much quicker than the field right now. Well, they're always working hard, all teams are working hard, so it's good to see these teams all work hard to try and do as best as possible.
Thomas lines up on pole position, and P2 goes to Daniel Ricciardo. A strong showing from the Australian. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Stroll, Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, and Albon. Vettel, Giovinazzi, Leclerc, they've taken a grid penalty, and Max Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Daniel Kvyat, and Hamilton, Magnussen, Norris, Esteban Ocon, and George Russell, Grosjean, Latifi, Aitken, and Nick de Vries.
So, heading to the race, as I said originally, we're going to have to go for the two-stop, which will be a quite short soft stint, and then go on to 2 sets of medium tyres. Grid penalties for both Leclerc and Hamilton start this race. I've bumped some other cars up some positions, but it's 5 red lights, and it's lights out and away we go. and we get a decent start. Managed to hold off Ricciardo, who gets jumped by Stroll off the line, it seems. So his medium tyres didn't work out that well going into the start, but he overtakes Stroll back into turn 1, and are now going to try and challenge us as we continue round the end of the first sector. And we're just going to try and pull away in this stint, because obviously Ricciardo should be going for this one-stop strategy, so we're going to need to gain a whole pit stop on him during the entire race for us to be able to win this race. And as we head towards the end of lap 1, we are indeed in first, but we're only half a second ahead of Ricciardo, so he's stayed with us on this first lap, and that just means we're going to have to push a bit harder on this first stint. It is quite a short stint, so we can just shred the tyres as much as possible, so we set a fastest lap at the end of lap 2, but Ricciardo is staying with us for now. The gap's only 8 tenths, as we set another fastest lap at the end of lap 3, and on lap 4, we see Lewis Hamilton trying to overtake the Renault of Sergio Perez, and as they head down the Midfield straight, he manages to go up the inside into the chicane. A bit of contact as Perez tries to fight back, but Lewis Hamilton will get the better exit, as he's starting further down the order because of his grid penalty. And as they head through the sweeping right-hander, he goes round the outside and will take the position and move himself up the order. Now as we head on towards the end of lap 4, we are finally outside of DRS range of Daniel Ricciardo, so we set another fastest lap in this Grand Prix, and we're already going to be coming to the pits at the end of this lap. But now on board with Valtteri Bottas, who got jumped by Pierre Gasly off the line, so he's trying to recover to get back up to Lance Stroll, who is currently in 3rd, and he overtakes Gasly for 4th position, and will try and hunt down the racing point to gain a podium position. Stroll's teammate Giovinazzi also looks to try and pounce on Pierre Gasly as he goes up the inside into the sweeping right-hander, and Gasly ends up losing 2 positions on lap 5, which is quite disappointing for him. But now back on board with us as we pull into the pits, and we're going to come out in quite a lot of traffic, I think, because if we are only going for 5 laps on these tyres, then there'll be quite a few people that started on mediums outside the top 10 that are hoping to go for one stop, and we will probably have to overtake most of those on track. So we put a new set of tyres on, quite a slow pit stop of 3.0, so we will probably lose even more time to Ricciardo in that, and well, if he gets a 2-second pit stop, then that's enough for him to jump us, as the gap was only just over a second as we pulled into the pits. We come out in P17, ahead of both Williams cars still, so we already gained a pit stop on them in 5 laps, but we now have some overtaking to do, and first up is Nicholas Latifi, who leaves us a little bit of space on the outside, and we look to take it with our much faster car, and we're going to get a slightly better exit here, and we can brake later into the penultimate corner, and we're going to go around the outside of Latifi up into P16, and now we have George Russell immediately ahead of us in the Haas, and he will try to defend from us as well, but as we head into turn 1, we're going to look to go round the outside of turn 2 with much better grip, and some of these slower cars is just about how long it will take for us to get past, because we do have a lot of pace compared to them. And now up next is Esteban Ocon for P7, but we do have some DRS and a straight which should be able to help us, and going down the Midfield straight, Ocon defends quite well because he also had DRS. We're going to try and get a better exit from the chicane. We fail to do so though, and Ocon is still close to Norris, which is helping him with slipstream, and it means that we're going to have to wait a bit longer to make the move on Esteban, and instead he is rapidly closing up to Norris. But we sense an opportunity when he gets held up a little bit by Norris. We tried to go around the outside into the last corner, but we couldn't quite, so instead we do it at this next corner, but we spot that Norris is slightly slow off the exit as well, and we're going to try and make it a double overtake as we go round the outside of Lando Norris into the final corner, and we move up 2 positions up into P6 in this race, and we leave Norris and Ocon to go side by side just behind us. Now, moving on to lap 8, we have Magnussen and Perez just ahead of us, and we're going to look to get a switch back on Kevin Magnussen as he lost the back end slightly and came across and almost hit us. So therefore we couldn't make the position, but we do have a lot more pace, and we're going to now try and go around the outside into this next corner here, but we go slightly wide, and that gives Magnussen a little bit of an opportunity to try and re-overtake us as we head on to this massive train. We've got Magnussen, Norris and Ocon all trying to re-overtake us, and now they're going to go 3 wide into this next corner, and Magnussen on the inside. He's made contact with Norris, he's made contact with Ocon as well, and Magnussen's been spun round in this Grand Prix, and he was running in a really good position for Alfa Romeo, but all his hard work has been undone with the contact with Esteban Ocon that has sent him spinning round as we're back on board with us now, trying to go up the inside of Perez. We just had so much more speed going into that right hander. We made a very bold move to go up the inside. A little bit of contact there, but we did manage to make the move, and as we head on to lap 9, we're up to P3 just behind Verstappen and our teammate Daniel Ricciardo. So the next few laps is just about trying to catch up to Verstappen, because he'll also be on the 1 stop, and therefore he is in the net P2. Now we're on board with Nick de Vries here in the Williams car, and he is going quite slowly, so I think he must just have some sort of issue, and he pulls over to the side of the road and has to retire from this Grand Prix. So he wouldn't have been any points anyway, but it's still a shame to retire this early into a Grand Prix. We're not even at the halfway distance yet, as you never know what could have happened. Now on board with the 2 Renault cars, as Esteban Ocon is looking to overtake his teammate Sergio Perez, as Ocon's going to go round the outside into the chicane, and he's going to move himself up a position. And these guys are some of the quicker 1-stop drivers, as obviously we had recently overtaken them, so they're running in 4th, 5th and 6th, Ocon, Perez and Norris. But now on board with Lewis Hamilton, who is trying to overtake Charles Leclerc, and he successfully overtakes Charles Leclerc. A similar move to what we made on Sergio Perez, diving up the inside into that fast right-hander and managing to pull off the move. So a very good move from the Mercedes driver. Now it's our turn to try and overtake Max Verstappen, and we just had so much more pace on that straight that I wasn't expecting to be able to make a move. We did pick up a slight track limit warning for slightly cutting turn 2, but we managed to make the move on Max Verstappen and move onwards and upwards in this race. Max Verstappen immediately comes into the pit straight after our battle and manages to overcut Valtteri Bottas, so he's had some very good pace on the medium tyres and is now ahead of the Mercedes man. As Sebastian Vettel is going to go for a move on the sole Williams car of Jack Aitken, but he's made a slight mistake and has gone wide, and now that's going to allow Verstappen the opportunity on his fresh hard tyres to go around the outside of Vettel instead. And as we head on to the Midfield straight, Vettel manages to hold on, but now Verstappen and Bottas will have good opportunities to make moves on Vettel. But it looks like Vettel's going to hold on, but it looks like Verstappen is going to lose a position to Bottas here, as Bottas goes round the outside into the chicane and moves himself up ahead of the Red Bull man, but obviously will still have to make another pit stop in this race, so Bottas would have needed to do that if he's going to try and think about finishing ahead of Verstappen in this race. As we head on to the end of lap 13, Ricciardo is also pitted, and he's only come out 3.5 seconds behind us though. So we're going to have to make a lot of time up in our final 14 laps of this race, as we're still only 3.5 seconds ahead of him. Now moving on to Valtteri Bottas again, and this time he's going to try and overtake Sebastian Vettel, and he's going to go around the outside into the chicane. The same move he did on Verstappen, who is still just behind these two, and he's going to try and push onwards in this race and catch up to the racing point of Giovinazzi, who is just ahead of him in this race. And as we move onwards to lap 16 now, and we're going to be coming into the pits at the end of this lap. But just before then, we're going to be on board with Lance Stroll, who's doing a very weird strategy. But this strategy is definitely not going to work, as he's slowing down now and he's going to have to pull over to the side. I was going to say he was on for a really good race, because he looked like he was set for a podium. So he was doing an aggressive two-stop on 2 sets of soft tyres and was going to be miles ahead of any of the other cars challenging him. He would have been battling Verstappen for the final podium position. But not anymore, as he's had to retire from this race. So shame once again for Racing Point, in a great position to fight for a podium, and they retire. Luckily for them, they did get one at the last episode at Canada, but you almost think they're allergic to getting on the podium in this series, as they've had multiple opportunities to, and each time have just about failed to. But we come into the pits for our second pit stop now, and we're going to come out quite far behind Ricciardo in this final stint. It's going to have to be a brilliant stint if we're going to make up the 16 or so seconds we need to overtake Daniel Ricciardo. We do gain just over a second on our outlap, and as we're now on board with the other Racing Point of Antonio Giovinazzi, who is still ahead of the Mercedes and Ferrari cars, so he's still looking like he could get around P4. He'll be battling Ocon and Norris on the one stop later in the race, as he's going to go around the outside of the Alfa Romeo of Nicholas Latifi, and he's going to move himself up a position. But Latifi and the Ferrari just behind him will try and fight back on Giovinazzi. And Latifi's actually got a decent run here on Giovinazzi. He's going to try and go round the outside into the chicane, and there's contact, and Giovinazzi has been spun round. So what a shame. Both Racing Points from brilliant positions in this race they've capitulated, and Giovinazzi is going to be last now after this spin, and he's going to have to try and recover, and there's probably aren't going to be any points for Racing Point this weekend. As we set a fastest lap of the Grand Prix on lap 90, still in pursuit of Daniel Ricciardo, we now have Sebastian Vettel trying to overtake Latifi, and he's going to use the outside line this time to make sure that he doesn't get spun round, unlike Giovinazzi, and he will move himself up a position. And now Valtteri Bottas will try and overtake the Alfa Romeo in the next few laps, as we on lap 19 have taken the gap down to 11.5 seconds to Daniel Ricciardo, but I don't think at this pace we're quite going to be able to do it, as we're now on board with Valtteri Bottas, who does overtake Nicholas Latifi, and now we have Lewis Hamilton, who's trying to overtake AlphaTauri of Danny Kvyat, and he successfully does so round the outside into the chicane, and he moves himself up a position. Obviously he had a grid penalty and he's still trying to recover in this race, and he's only 2 positions behind his teammate Bottas. We've now taken the gap down to under 10 seconds from Ricciardo. With 6 laps to go, we need to do it at more than a second or half a lap if we want to be able to win this race. Is now on board with Lewis Hamilton trying to overtake the Alfa Romeo of Nicholas Latifi, and he does so up the inside into the chicane, but Latifi will fight back, but Hamilton will probably get a better exit here, and I'll have the better line into the sweeping right-hander, and he will cut in front, and Danny Kvyat's going to go around the outside of Latifi as well. So opportunistic move from Kvyat here, and it looks like he's going to move himself up to get some good points to AlphaTauri, and he successfully does so around the outside. So a good move from the Russian. And on to lap 21, and we are still setting good lap times, and we did get the gap down to 8 seconds on lap to Ricciardo, so we need to continue at this pace, as now we're on board with Sebastian Vettel, who's trying to overtake George Russell, and there's a bit of contact, and that also allows Bottas to get around the outside of Russell as well. and move himself up a position in this race. And Bottas is going to go round the outside, and Hamilton tried it on Russell, but couldn't quite get the move to follow his teammate through. So Russell seems to be falling backwards in this race, which means he's unlikely to be able to get points for Haas now. I think he's running in about P8 now, as Lewis Hamilton is going to catch up and try and overtake him. 4 P8, just behind his teammate and Sebastian Vettel, and he moves himself up position and is going to look to try and catch up to the cars ahead of him, and the other one-stop drivers of Ocon and Norris, who will try and hold out as much as possible. But we're still on board with Russell here, as his pain isn't ending yet, and he's going to drop down to P10 as Danny Kvyat is going to get DRS and is going to try and go up the inside into the chicane, but Russell holds on for now. Kvyat in the end was patient, and as we go back on board with these two, Danny Kvyat is now going to try and go up the inside into the sweeping right-hander, and Kvyat was patient enough to make the move on George Russell and made sure to do it on that lap. So George Russell is now going to have to try and hold on for a solitary point in this race. Now on board with the Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas, who is going to try and overtake the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel, and he's going to do so around the outside into the chicane, and he successfully does so. So now it's him who's leading the charge towards the Renault and McLaren on the one stop, and he should have a lot more pace than them, so they should be pretty close come the end of the race. And now on board with Charles Leclerc, who's trying to overtake the Alfa Romeo of Nicholas Latifi, and will also be trying to take the final point off George Russell if possible. And he's going to do so round the outside, and he takes the position off Nicholas Latifi, and now he will be trying to overtake Russell in probably the next lap, and I'm not sure Russell's going to be able to hold on for the final 3 laps that there are in this Grand Prix. So as we continue moving onwards in this race, we're still pushing. 3.7 seconds is the gap to Ricciardo, but we've only got 2 laps to go, and that means that we're just not gaining enough. But on board with Charles Leclerc on lap 26, and Russell finally has to admit defeat to that points position, and Leclerc goes round the outside to take the position from him and move himself up into 10th. Now back on board with us, and this was the point I've given up on catching Ricciardo. Now he will win this Grand Prix, as the gap is still 3.6 seconds, and we have not gained enough time on him. But now Valtteri Bottas, I said he was in pursuit of the McLaren and Renault on the one stop. He's now going to try and go round the outside of Lando Norris as they start their final lap, and Valtteri Bottas has successfully stolen the position away from Lando Norris to take P5 in this race. And as we head through the final set of corners, Ricciardo will win the French Grand Prix. So it's been an end of our streak of 7 races, but our team continues their streak of winning 9 races in a row. Ricciardo winning the first and the last so far of this streak, as we take home P2, and Max Verstappen will join us on the podium in 3rd. And Esteban Ocon will win driver of the day.
Happy as they make their way up to the podium. A much-deserved victory and a brilliant performance from them all.
So we celebrate on the podium. Ricciardo on the top step again. Has been absent from the top step for a while, but he takes his 2nd race victory of the season. So for him, that's good news. He's obviously taken the 2nd most amount of victories this season, as we've won every race except for the Australian Grand Prix.
Thomas increases their championship lead after an incredible day of racing. Who was your driver of the day, Ant?
Difficult call, but I'd like to say Esteban Ocon. He's just so gifted at getting the most out of his tyres, and he showed that today.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. The current leaders continue to extend their lead at the top. Meanwhile, a strong weekend from Red Bull this time out, and they improve their position in the championship. After an event like that, who knows what the sport has in store for us next time? Be sure to join us again as we continue to bring you the latest excitement in Formula One.
So Daniel Ricciardo wins the Grand Prix ahead of us, who finished in second, but we do take fastest lap, so we minimise the loss in the championship. Max Verstappen takes home third in his Red Bull, and Esteban Ocon is fourth with a brilliant recovery drive for Renault, starting 17th. Obviously, we said he got knocked out in Q1, but he did manage to recover. Bottas actually finished where he started in fifth, but courtesy of the 2 racing points that would have finished ahead of him, he gained a couple of positions. Norris in 6th on the 1 stop, and he has also had a good recovery drive after starting 16th. Vettel is in 7th, Lewis Hamilton recovered to 8th, Kvyat had an impressive drive for 9th, finished quite far ahead of his teammate, who must have had some issues in this race. Charles Leclerc was 10th, George Russell just missed out on points in 11th, Latifi was 12th, ahead of his teammate who probably would have got points if he hadn't been spun round, and Sainz was 13th, Albon 14th, Perez 15th, Magnussen 16th, Gasly 17th, Giovinazzi 18th, Grosjean 19th, Aitken 20th, and Stroll and De Vries not making it to the flag. In the championship, we now lead by 72 points over Ricciardo, who is 44 points ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who is 30 points ahead of his teammate, who's 4th. Verstappen now overtakes Stroll for 5th, and also jumps the Ferrari man of Charles Leclerc. Norris holds on to 8th because Giovinazzi failed to score. Ocon moves up to 10th, Vettel down to 11th. Gasly, Albon and Perez are all extremely close still, but neither of them scored this weekend. Sainz is still 15th on 10 points. Kvyat gets some more points on the board to be on 6 points. Grosjean remains on 2 points, and the rest of the drivers are still yet to score, despite how close Russell and Magnussen have come so far this season. In the Constructors, we're on exactly 400 points, almost double, but 188 ahead of Mercedes, who are double racing points, and 107 ahead of them. Red Bull move up to 4th, just ahead of Ferrari. Then come McLaren, Renault and AlphaTauri, with Haas obviously still on 2 points, and Alfa Romeo and Williams still yet to score. Well, our car is the best car on the grid. There's nothing more about it, really. It started off as a close rivalry. It hasn't been that close in the end, but every driver and every team has been trying to push their best that they can. No, I'm happy for them. Our car, as it is, fantastic, so it was always going to be one of us on the top step of the podium. Yes, it was a very good performance. They obviously chose the better strategy by starting on the medium tyres, which I wasn't brave enough to do after my issues in Q2. So in the rivalry breakdown, we finally beat Valtteri Bottas as we move up to over 30, and therefore we gain 700 acclaim for the driver, which does help us stay at level 14. Daniel Ricciardo is level 15, and as a team we're level 17. So we still have less acclaim than Ricciardo, but I think if we continue performing well, we may be able to overtake him in acclaim. Obviously, if he finishes ahead of us, that may be harder. We did have 2k damage reductions. I think that was because of our fault that we had in practice. But other than that, we generally gained money due to the fact that we met all 3 of our goals this weekend. So our sponsors gave us quite a lot of money. We're up to 25.24 million. Obviously, I think it's in 2 races' time that we have to sign Ricciardo again. Actually, maybe just after the Austrian Grand Prix. But I will leave the episode there, and we'll see you guys next time for the Austrian Grand Prix.